Now that the data reference works, we can do one final thing to really make it nice to use. Currently, if someone goes in and wants to edit one of my attributes using the bitmask data reference, they really just get an ugly properties window that allows them to manually edit the config string. Not really that great. I know from experience that data references can have graphical editors whose purpose in life is really to create a config string that gets persisted. So let's make one of those for our data reference. Back in the code, I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping things here. I've got some private fields here, and I want to make public accessors for them. This will be necessary for when we create our graphical editor. So, for the sake of sanity, I'm going to rename these private fields to have an underscore in front of them. Matter of personal preference, but it might keep us from being confused. Okay, so I'm going to create some public properties backed by these internal fields. Now the get accessor for this is going to be relatively straightforward. In fact, very straightforward. We're just going to return that backing field. But the set accessor, there's going to be an extra step. Normally in a set accessor, we are likely to check and make sure that perhaps the value being set is not identical to the value that's already there. And if it's different, then persist the new value. Of course, if you've done any work with data binding, you're used to notifying consumers that your property has changed. Well, we need to do something similar for the AFSDK. In fact, we need to do exactly what we did when we set the config string manually. When we push in a new config string, we signal to the AFSDK that the configuration has changed. So here, we will do the same thing. By calling save config changes. I'm going to pause the video and insert exactly the same thing, but for the index. Okay, so now we have the same accessor set for index as we do for the target attribute name. We will use these now in the Windows form control that we create as our custom editor. To our project, we will add a new Windows form. And we can call this guy bitmask editor. Okay. Now, our bitmask editor will need various things, but the first thing that it needs is the proper constructor. By default, this has a constructor that takes no arguments. But for the purposes of use as a data reference editor, there are two arguments we want. First of all, we want to pass the current instance of the bitmask data reference. In other words, the data reference instance that we're about to edit, and then whether or not it's read-only. Okay, so our data reference editor gets instantiated here. We will assume at the appropriate time. Gets instantiated when someone wants to edit the data reference. And we have access directly to the instance of our data reference. So for example, I can get the data reference dot target attribute name. Cool. I also have access to the data reference dot index property. In other words, both of those properties that we just made public. Cool. So when I spin up my data reference editor, I probably want to read these properties and add them into some text boxes. So in the name of science, I will add 2 text boxes here. One to hold the target attribute name, and the other to hold the bit index. And just to be nice, a couple of labels. I guess I should call my text box something useful like TB, target attribute name, and my numeric up down index. Perfect. It also stands to reason that I will need maybe a button for OK and a button for canceling. So I'll call this btn cancel. Give it a text of cancel. And make the other one button OK. The name of button OK. Go back and fix that text. Beautiful. Adjust the size here, and we're ready to write some code. Okay, so when this editor opens up, I really want to set the target attribute name text equal to whatever it is currently in the data reference, and the numeric up down value as the index within the data reference. Okay. So now, one of 2 things happens. Someone hits the cancel button, in which case we pretty much just close down and die, or someone hits OK, and the event handler for that is going to be that we persist the changes. So pretty much we undo the process from when we made this editor. Of course, in order to access our data reference, it would probably help to persist it. So bitmask dr, we will persist the value of that dr. Beautiful. So now we actually have access to that. dr.targetAttributeName is going to be tb_targetAttributeName text, and that dr index is going to be the integer cast of the numeric up-down value. Beautiful. And then, of course, get rid of the form. Okay, so we have our editor built, it knows how to both display the current configuration and change it. So the final step is to tell our data reference that this editor exists. There's a property on the data reference class of editor type. So let's implement that. Close our properties there and implement the editor type property. And all we need to return is the type of bitmask editor that we just created. So if we do that, if we say that the editor type is a bitmask editor, and that bitmask editor has the right constructor signature, whatever our data reference class is, as well as a flag for if it's read-only, which we didn't touch in this example, but of course in real life you probably should. We're ready to test this out. I'll build this and register it, and I will open PySystem Explorer again. Okay. So if we look down here, and I go in and try to edit one of these attributes using my lovely data reference, I should get a nice editor box where I can change what we're looking at. So if I reset this just to look at the parent attribute, and I say, oh, go look at the second bit, 0, 1, 2, look at that, it updates. And if I go back into the editor, sure enough, behaves exactly as we want to. So there we have it. Our brand new data reference, which knows how to go look at a relative value, apply some logic to us, handle the case of the value being bad, handle all of the possible rich data calls, and give us a nice, pretty editor.